What happens if your neighbor is a cold-blooded killer or psychopath? Surely your days will be scary. Well, that's how I'm feeling right now. My neighbor whose house is right in front of mine is a psychopath named Jimmy. I once read a comic that told a story about a psychopath who uses a human head as a flower pot, or uses the corpse of his own victim as a taxidermy material. I can't imagine being Jimmy's next victim. The story goes like this: that night was a very cold night, because it was snowing outside, you could even say a blizzard. I, who at that time was having dinner with my little family, heard a sound like something being dragged. "Hey, it's Jimmy," I said to myself. I peeked through the window. Jimmy was dragging a shovel and carrying a suitcase. I don't know what he did with those two things. "What's wrong, Ven?" asked my mother. It's nothing, ma'am," I answered nervously. "Okay, brush your teeth and go to sleep. Tomorrow you have to get up early." Yes, Mom." The next day when I left for school, I crossed the road to the street in front of Jimmy's house, because that's where I usually waited for my school bus. "What are you pondering?" "I've seen that I'm just daydreaming," asked Louise, my school friend, who at that time was both waiting for the school bus. "Maybe these are the tracks Jimmy left when he dragged his shovel last night," I said. "Well, don't worry about it, it doesn't matter to you anyway," Louise reassured me. "The clock shows 13:45, which means school hours are over." On the way I saw a crowd in a house not far from mine. It was the Angles family house. Apparently the whole house had died in a tragic way, namely their bodies were cut into pieces one another. The police are examining the surroundings of the crime scene and concluded that they were killed last night. In front of the Angles house, Louise saw the same footprints as the tracks she had found in front of Jimmy's house. "Ven, look," said Louise, pointing at a trace of drag. "There's no mistake, the culprit must be Jimmy. He killed the family last night." I don't know what grudge Jimmy felt that he had the heart to do this to this family, even though Mr. Engel is known as a friendly person. I'd love to help the police by letting them know it was Jimmy, but I'm too scared to say it. I'm afraid that later he will take revenge on me and my family went through the same thing that the Engels went through. And Louise worked up the courage to tell the policeman. "Sir." "Yes, son, what's wrong?" "I think I know who the perpetrator of this crime is." "Oh yes? Then come with me to meet my friends." Then Louise and I were invited into Mr. Engel's magnificent house. "Who's the culprit, son?" The policeman looked impatient. "The culprit is Jimmy." "Where is the house?" "The house is right in front of Albin's house, let me take you." Then about 15 police cars moved towards the house. Louise and I just sat in the car out of fear. After carrying out the ambush, the police succeeded in arresting Jimmy. Evidence was found in the form of a shovel, a suitcase covered in blood, a large machete and a small scalpel. And at that house the police also saw several severed heads made into flower pots, just like the comics I had read. After the trial, Jimmy was sentenced to death, and the city is safe from psychopathic threats. 2 years passed. I saw Jimmy's house from my window. The house is empty, unkempt, and looks so dirty. Then a black car came and parked right in front of his house. From inside the car, came out 4 family members who apparently wanted to occupy the house. "Oh, pretty good house," said the mother. "Maybe it's comfortable if we live here," continued the father, who was lifting the suitcase, assisted by his son. The 3 family members entered the house. "Wow, there's a new neighbor. Hopefully not like Jimmy," I thought. However, when I looked at the house one more time, I seemed to see a black shadow, in the form of a human, and this shadow was standing at the window of Jimmy's house. I started to get goosebumps, then the shadow started walking to another room. I rubbed my eyes, maybe it was just my hallucination. 2 hours after that, just as I was having lunch, I heard screams and loud laughter. It's from Jimmy's house. I heard the sound, immediately ran out of the house to see the situation in the house, as well as my other neighbors. When the neighbors broke down the empty front door of Jimmy's house, the police finally came and broke down the front door of his house too. But still won't open. When one of the police kicked the door as hard as he could, the door finally broke down. All the police and my other neighbors went into the house. Just then, my friend Louise came up to me. "Ben, what's all the fuss?" "I don't know, earlier we heard a voice screaming for help from inside Jimmy's house which was empty." "Come on, let's go in, Ben." Louise and I also went into the house. While there, what we saw made us almost can't believe it. The family that had just come and moved into Jimmy's house were now dead in the living room. His father's body was decapitated, near his body lay a knife. Then the mother's body was dismembered, apparently with a fairly large machete. And the child was cruelly mutilated, the contents of his stomach scattered everywhere. This incident happened again like 2 years ago to the Angle family. Made me and several other neighbors unable to see this heinous sight, some of them even vomited. The neighbors and the police were discussing, who did all this? It can't be Jimmy, because he was sentenced to death 2 years ago. Everyone is confused, while the bodies of the family have been taken to the hospital. Then I got up the courage to talk to the police, that I had seen a human-shaped shadow visible in the window of the house. At first, the police didn't believe it, but it turned out that several neighbors had also seen the figure and also informed the police. "It's hard to believe," said one policeman. Louise also realized something. Could it be, that is the ghost of Jimmy? Everyone thought the same as Louise, including me. It was Jimmy's house, his own family he had killed. What a heartless psychopath. Some people kept trying to destroy the house, by burning it, using a construction car, a house-destroying car, and so on. But the next day, the house returned to its original state, although it still looked old and neglected. Finally Jimmy's house was left alone until the next. The government brought me and other neighbors to stay away from the area. And until now, no one dared to even go near that house. Because a black shadow that resembles Jimmy awaits the arrival of his visitor.